I know you said you wanted to talk about overall initiative systems. Let me tell you, Steven rolls for combat.
Done. I do. I roll for combat.
Does.
I do. I roll for
Well,
combat.
yeah. So do you do like a side-based initiative? Are you doing like every character rolls
I'm on a
initiative?
VTT, so I press
Yeah.
a button and it does everything.
There you go.
It's also
I'm
heavily scripted, so I press a button, it sorts, it's all done. Takes
I'm
a
always
split second.
interested in different initiative systems for sure, and interlaced ones like the one you described are cool. The worst initiative system possible is a batch initiative where everybody goes on one side and then everybody goes on the other side.
No tactics. That destroys
or
tactics.
the side initiative, as you said, Bob, with the batch initiative.
Terrible.
The problem with those is that you can just have some big issues, especially if there's a lot of units on one side.
That's how you do a TPK.
Yes. There have been numerous examples of TPKs, even against a pretty easy encounter, where in some editions of D&D or Pathfinder, where it's just like, yeah, this vampire stat block has a fireball, and there's 12 of them in here. And we did batch initiative, and vampires won. They did 12 fireballs. No one had evasion. And so they were easy vampires. Everyone made all of their saving throws. They succeeded on most of the 12. And they died anyway because they took 12 times half damage, and that was enough to kill the entire party or whatever. So, you can have some big issues if you do batch initiative. But there's some cool ones. Like the one you described is cool. Another one that's kind of cool, Shadow of the Demon Lord does an initiative where the monster generally goes first if you want to take all of your actions, but you can take fewer actions in order to go first. And everyone who takes fewer actions goes first that round. And you can choose to go last in one round and then first in the next round, which will let you go twice in a row, essentially. And then among the PCs, they can go in whatever order they want. And so that's a kind of cool strategic system where you go when you want to go, but at a cost.
Yeah, that's...
And I think that's kind of like the key to some of this is when you have an initiative order, like that's just set for the entire combat, then you do sometimes still end up in this thing where, okay, I just went and now I know I'm not going to get to go for like 10 or 15 more minutes, depending on, how long people take with their turns. So people can kind of like tune out. But with this sort of combat, which was essentially, I see people saying like a popcorn initiative, rather than like the GM just like randomly calling on people or something. It was just, players wanting to stay focused and like looking for the moment when like, okay, I can do like my thing here. And I guess the other players just, being gracious to give them the space and like, just kind of waiting your turn, even though there's not a specific order. So
for what it's worth,
it kept everybody engaged.
When I used to run tournament Dungeons and Dragons for Goodman Games and DCC, the people who used to make it to the final rounds were the ones that on their very first turn, they would reorder themselves in the initiative they wanted to. They would actually not even go. And these are like, again, this is tournament D&D, which is a whole different thing. But they were always the best ones. So they'd be like, okay, let's reorder. And they didn't matter what they rolled. They would just reorder themselves exactly in the order they want. And then they would start the combat. And it seems like I always thought about that because it really worked, especially at that level where it was like life and death every encounter and just getting harder and harder. And then they used to do all this battlefield control too. It's like they would reorder battlefield control. First thing they do was like, a fog of war or, everything they can to mess up the monster so they had time to get ready. And then they would have the frontline fighters go to the front and the wizards go in the back. And it worked great until because it's still tournament D&D, is that they were in a dungeon, a big one, and they were up fighting some creature, I forgot what it was, and then they did a wall of fire to separate the spellcasters from the melee so they were safe. But then a boulette came from under the ground right below spellcasters, and they were like, no! And I'm like, you thought you were sneaky, but I was sneakier. And I went to hell in a handbasket very quickly. That became a mess. And that's what makes games so much fun.
It really does. Yeah. I feel like it's, sometimes if you have that really tightly built strategy, then sometimes it's fragile,
Yeah.
and you were able to upset it with that new tactic that you didn't expect.
Yeah, I remember there's a monk who had to like run back to save the casters because they were like, "Oh crap!" It was like the boulette. They did not expect that. No one expects the boulette. And the best initiative or most interesting one I ever saw, which was it's Dungeon Twister. So Dungeon Twister, the way it works is, and that's a board game, is that you get cards, and the cards are like it's like say 1 through 4. And that's the order you're going to go. And everyone puts down the card. But once you use a card, you can't reuse it. So and when you use all 4 cards, you get a new set. So you got to be really tricky because it's like, do you want to go early or do you want to go late? Because once you use it, you can't reuse it. And then you're stuck. And there's a lot of tactics with that. And now you're against other players. It's kind of a stretch.
Gloomhaven has something like that too, although it's cooperative, where the cards have initiative values
1
on
to
them
100, you're right,
that determine where you're going to go in the initiative order.
Right.
And those can be interesting. Another fun one that some people talked about in chat that's in several RPGs is basically the exact opposite of batch initiative, where anybody on side A can go, and then somebody on side B goes, and you go back and forth until one of the sides runs out. And then the side that still has actions keeps going, and some bosses get multiple turns because they're just worth more than one person. That's in like Lancer, that's in Fabula Ultima, that's in a few. And that can be fun. And I thought when Bob started talking about it that it was going to be something similar to that, but then it sort of is, but it banks it up and then cashes it out at certain times rather than spending it 1 for 1 right away, which allows for so many interesting ways to combine into a mega turn that I find that fascinating. And probably, obviously I haven't seen the details, but I can tell that's a good game design mechanic in terms of like the depth that you can give to the GM with hoarding and cashing out.